Hey everyone, I'm Brosif, coming at you with the patch 14.3 rundown. Since Mortdog took a break from all the extra community work he was doing, I decided I would fill in with a patch rundown of my own. While I'm not a game dev, I'm currently the rank 1 player on the North American server, and can hopefully provide you some insight into the balance changes coming in the next patch. With that, let's get right into it. Starting off with the system changes. The first change is the PvE loot. They have generally lowered the amount of loot you get from PvE rounds, and Scuttle Puddle and Crabbrave no longer added 2 additional components to the game. Since the introductions of hacks, they have basically dramatically increased the amount of resources between splitting gold and getting extra augments, just like hacked augments, getting some more HP or attack speed from the special little buffs that you get from PvE rounds as well. There has been a problem of there being a bit too many resources in the game, so they have basically lowered the amount of gold that you get across the course of the game. So that will make, firstly, the really high cap comps that require going level 8 a little bit more difficult to play. So like you might see a little bit less Boombot, you might see a little bit less Fast 9 5 amp as well. And you'll probably see a little bit more reroll and comps that play off of winning more rounds in the early game because they're not getting rolled quite as quickly across stage 4 from people having many more resources. I'm looking forward to this change. I think it increases the amount, the importance of managing your resources well and playing more uncontested because you don't have as much gold to just brute force and roll for your contested units. And it's a change I'm happy to see that they. Next is on the black market hack. These are really rare. They happen in less than, I think less than 1% of games where you get black market on 2-1. So increasing the chance that you see black market will hopefully allow people to play with more of the black market augments earlier. Stuff like wise spending early, or gargantuan resolve early, or cool pact. Those will all be slightly more common on 2-1. Which should allow for some more interesting and higher variance games. Next is the Golem Armory. So this is a very big change. The gold-generated Golem has been replaced with the RNG Golem. This Golem is equipped with a random emblem, a random artifact, and a random radiant item. Now this is quite the fun change and interesting change, I'll say. What a lot of people don't know or aren't like super in tune with is the fact that the gold golem has by far the best base stats of any of the golems. It has the most armor, the most base health, and the most MR. So giving the RNG golem a random emblem, a random artifact, and a random radiant emblem will make it really powerful if it rolls basically any tank item, and especially if you roll any emblem that is useful for your comp. So my prediction, or my guess, is that the RNG golem will be very good, probably the best general pick, and on average it should at least be at least be better than the tank golem, who is like kind of not that good right now. Sometimes you just have to take frontline, so you take it. Right now, a lot of high-low players prefer taking backline if their comp can allow it, especially if they have any kind of extra damage on their team or any damage amplification traits. So stuff like Street Demon or Glass Cannon or Divinicore, things like that. If they have any of those, they're quite inclined to take the ranged golem. But I'm going to definitely try taking the RNG golem and hopefully high roll as a result. The last system change is on eggs. So they have improved the power of the 13-turn egg. The fact that the stats were bad on this speaks very high volumes because you'd only pick it when you're in a good spot, really. So the fact that it still is bad probably means it needs some help. I'm not sure the exact amount of gold they've improved it. I would guess it's like 5 to 10 gold, just as a minor change. But if it's really good, we'll start seeing people really gamble their whole games on being able to take the 13 egg and hopefully cash it out. All right, on to the trait changes. So starting with Cypher. You basically never ever see people play 4 or 5 Cypher after the cash out, even like the best Cypher comp, which is the best comp that, there's like 2 comps that run Cypher after you cash out. It's the LeBlanc reroll comp, and the other comp is the Draven slash the Draven slash Zeri slash Galio slash Sejuani comp. And both of those only run 3. They're giving a small bump to 4 and 5 Cypher, so that in those comps, you're going to get a whopping 70% extra AD and AP after you cash out on your Cypher units. This might change how we play the Draven comp, which normally runs 4 Bastions and 3 Cypher. We might see it either drop the Senna on the board and play 4 Cyphers, or even maybe drop 2 units and maybe play 5 Cypher. We'll see. I think the LeBlanc comp is actually fairly good and maybe able to use this as well. Instead of building Archangels, you could maybe go full damage. You just go blue buff, JG plus another damage item. And then maybe run 5 Cypher instead of running the extra strategists, who are decent, but maybe not quite as good as 70 AP and AD. Well, only time will tell. Next is Divinicore. Vertical Divinicore is not super good. The only real time you ever see this played in competitive games is when people get a Divinicore spat at very low cost. So if they see branching out into Divinicore, or they have a trainer golem with Divinicore, then you can choose to opt into Divinicore, because then you have one for basically no cost. It is quite bad to lose an entire gold augment to take the emblem, and it's also pretty bad to lose your prismatic augment to take the emblem as well. So they're buffing the, was it 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're buffing the 5, 6, and 7 piece. And hopefully, and that will increase the amount of stats that you get out of it by just a bit. I think the comp becomes, it looks like 5% better at the higher levels in terms of the offensive and defensive stats you get. So it's a pretty meaningful change, and this makes stuff like Divinicore Z or Divinicore Z slash or Divinicore Legendaries more viable in more games. So hopefully we'll see more of that played. Next is Golden Ox. Golden Ox got quite a big bump down from the last patch till basically it's not super strong at the moment, and there are very few games where you'd want to play either 4 or 6 Golden Ox. So they have bumped up 4 and 6 Golden Ox's damage amp from 22 to 24 and 25 to 26. It's a little bit to help the comp. There are still games, even on the current patch, 14.2, I believe, where there's still games in the current patch where it can be decent to play, especially if you get a Golden Ox emblem for free, so like for low cost. So for low cost, you can play it sometimes, but it's really not commonly played at the moment. And this will hopefully help out the people who are playing 4 or 6 Golden Ox. Interesting thing to note is Golden Ox is actually pretty decent already if you can manage to acquire a lot of gold and a lot of resources, because it allows you to basically scale really hard with how much gold that you have. So I think this will make those situations easier to win out, and it will also make it viable in slightly more situations. Then on to Nitro. Nitro is like basically one of the weakest comps in the game at the moment. So they're giving a fairly large buff to the laser damage. I think this goes up by about 10% in damage. So if you see your dinosaur doing like 4,000 to 6,000 damage is pretty common, you'll now see it do 4,400 to 6,600 damage, which is a small but meaningful increase. Sometimes you just barely leave their backline carry alive, and this damage bump will help it get it over that edge. They also have increased the stacking you get. One of the weakest worth the wait units right now is Kindred, and this bit buffed from 12 to 25 means that late game you're going to be getting a lot more chrome stacks, which means that if you can last long enough in the game, you can get something like 400, 500, maybe 600, even 600 on your dinosaur with the 4-star, because this is basically more stacks than the rest of your team gave before. They're also buffing the more relevant changes. They're buffing the 3-piece, or not the 3-piece. They're buffing the 3-star. So the 3 stars will give 7 chrome instead of 6, which will hopefully stack it up faster as well. Next on a techie. Vertical techie at 6 and 8 weren't doing so well, so they're giving a small buff at 6 and a small buff at 8 to hopefully bump it up a little bit. And Vanguard is seeing a small buff across the board, so the durability while you're shielded goes up by from 10% to 12%, and then the 6-piece durability is going up from 16 to 18. This equates to basically a 1% overall increase in how much frontline your entire team has. So a comp like Vanguard Marksman is basically getting 1% more frontline. So it's a small change, but it helps those comps just a little bit in the matchups where like you're just barely not surviving long enough. Next is Anima Squad. Anima Squad sees a small buff at 7. It's getting 40 armor MR instead of 35. After the last Anima Squad, or after the last nerf to Anima Squad, the comps hasn't really bounced back since then. So they're giving it a small buff to the amount of frontline the comp has. And then Amp is one of the biggest changes that we have here. So the feeling was that the offensive power at 4 Amp wasn't quite good enough. So what they've done here is that they have bumped the amount of charges you get at 4 Amp to they bumped it up to 4 from 3. So instead of getting 3 extra charges, you get 4 extra charges. Now, a lot of the Amp units don't scale that hard with every stack. The most notable ones are Nidalee, Neferi, and Annie. They see like the largest percentage increase in how much damage they do based on how much Amp you have. So this buff helps the board the most when you're on all of the units except Samira. The comp in the current meta is really, really good when you have this Samira. If you have this Samira, you get 5 charges, a lot of HP, and your units do a lot of damage. But you can't quite say the same at 4. So this buff hopefully bridges the gap a little bit and allows you to, if not win the fights, at least kill more units when you lose when you're playing on 4 Amp, up until you get the Samira. In compensation, I think this would be a little bit too strong if they just buffed the charges without nerfing it in some way. So they've nerfed the amount of HP you get at 4 Amp in order to compensate. So you get more damage, but a little bit less frontline. Bastion. Bastion at 6 is being buffed from 70 to 75. Remember that this is doubled for the first 10 seconds. So you get 150 armor and MR and versus 140. So hopefully that helps the comp a little bit. The most common backline you see for Vertical Bastion is often Zeri, because she scales and she usually runs Ginsu, and she can heal up some of the frontline with Gunblade. We'll see how much this makes that comp more viable, but in the instances where you do play 6 Bastion, this should help out just a little bit. On a Dynamo, you don't really ever see anyone playing 4 Dynamo. The comps that run Dynamo the most frequently are you usually run 2. You usually try to run 2 or 3 Dynamo in the Vexotech comp, and you also see 2 Dynamo on level 9 in the Vanguard Marksman comp. So they're adding a bit more to 4 Dynamo to help out comps that run MF solo carry or like primary carry. MF right now is seen in a comp run with Zeri and 5 Exotech, but she's really not a reliable carry by herself as the primary carry. You usually have to pair her with Zeri in order to get the most mileage out of her. So this buff is intended to help comps that run Jhin, MF, Aurora, and probably Morgana pop off just a little bit more. So hopefully this helps a little bit, and we can see some more 4 Dynamo comps being viable. Exotech, getting just 1 small buff. Flux Capacitor was by far the weakest item at the moment. So you can settle with it on Zeri, but you're not really happy to have it. You would much rather have Pulse, which is the crit one on the current patch. So they're buffing Flux Capacitor by 5 AD. It helps it a little bit. I think Zeri becomes like 2 to 4% stronger as a result of this buff. So that helps a little bit. And combined with some other buffs that you'll see in the future, it might raise that comp up just a little bit. Marksman. Marksman is seeing a buff at the 4-piece AD. Now, you get 25% extra AD every 6 seconds compared to 20. Now, I think this buff isn't quite in the right direction. The reason why is because Brand is getting nerfed, or like the Brand comp is getting nerfed, which we'll look at in a little bit. The Vex comp is also getting nerfed, and the comp that is being untouched is Vanguard Marksman. Now, just to put stuff in perspective, they have to lock in the direction that the changes are happening, basically 2 or 3 days into the patch. And 2 or 3 days into the patch, everyone thought Brand was broken, and everyone thought Vex was broken. So, and people didn't think Vanguard Marksman is very good. After a little bit of meta evolving and some optimization in the comp, Vanguard Marksman has basically come out to be about the 2nd or 3rd best comp on the patch. So this buff to it combined with the Vanguard buff probably is going to make this comp really strong on the next patch, and I would look out for it. Hopefully it doesn't become too dominating, but I would expect Marksman to become significantly better from being an already good comp on the patch after this change. Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire, they are buffing at the 4-piece. You're going to get 1% more attack speed per stack. Remember that the stack's up to 10 times. So you cap out at 110 extra attack speed instead of just 100. This is a small buff. It should help the bridge between getting to from the start of the game to getting to 6 Rapid Fire. Even right now, 6 Rapid Fire is pretty good. The main important thing is that for 6 Rapid Fire, you need to not be building Ginsu. Ginsu is really bad with 6 Rapid Fire because the buff from 6 Rapid Fire takes you pretty close to the attack speed cap already. So getting some more attack speed from Ginsu is just not really significant. You want to be building Gunblade, and you want to be building damage when you have vertical Rapid Fire. And the comp really struggles at 4 Rapid Fire though. So the bump here is hopefully going to help it win some more rounds in the mid game, and hopefully make it a little bit more viable. Street Demon. I think people generally agree that Brand Street Demons is the strongest comp on the patch, so they're giving it a small bump down. In the previous patch, they buffed it from 15 to 17, and they're taking away half of that buff. So they're lowering it from 17 to 16 of all of the stats. Remember that these stats are doubled for Street Demons and empowered by 50% more for the signature hexes. So this equates to like 3 or 4 AP or AD and HP on the Street Demon units that are also on the signature hexes. So it should be a small bump down just to hopefully bring it into line. All right, next, onto the champions. Kog'Maw is seeing a whopping 3 AD increase. I know in League of Legends, when you see a 2 AD increase, it doesn't mean very much, but in TFT, this is a really, really big change. This 3 AD applies to basically the entirety of the kit. So if you build a Deathblade, and it gives you 55% extra AD, you get 55% extra AD, right? Which is different than the system that is in League of Legends. The 55% gets multiplied by your base AD. So raising Kog'Maw's base AD by 3 basically makes it do 6% damage all the time, no matter what build, no matter what is going on your board. So this buff is a pretty big buff, and I think personally, I think Kog'Maw is already a fairly strong 1 cost. I think he is the best holder of AD and attack speed items, and he was really strong if you can get both Boombot and Rapid Fire activated. If you have those 2 traits activated, he becomes a very, very strong unit, able to win a lot of rounds over the course of Stage 3, and even some early Stage 4 rounds. So maybe this will make Kog'Maw reroll viable, but I think the most significant change is he is a significantly better item holder from being an already good item holder. So I'd watch out for this guy. 2 costs. So few changes here. Illaoi is one of the weakest units in the game at the moment. One thing to note about Bastions is they actually have to artificially deflate the amount of base armor and MR the Bastions get, because if they had too much, they would just become too tanky when you activate the Bastions trait, because the Bastion trait gives a lot of armor and MR. So they're buffing Illaoi's base armor and MR from 45 to 50. It should make her about 2 to 3% tankier, maybe a little bit less when you have more Bastions. But it should help a little bit, especially in those early game rounds where her win rate really isn't very good. Next is Nefiri. Nefiri was very strong at when you got a lot of amp online. So they're nerfing her alpha AD damage by 10% from 175 to 165. I think this makes her like 2 or 3% weaker in terms of how much damage she will deal. So, and it's the amount that she's weaker scales more as you have more amp in. So the nerf to her early game is like not that significant, but the nerf to the late game is quite a bit larger. So this should get her a little bit more into line. I didn't think she was actually particularly that strong late into the patch, like after people started really solving how you're supposed to play a lot of the other compositions. Naafiri didn't end up being very strong in my opinion. She was like probably a high B tier comp. This nerf will make her noticeably worse. Yeah, I think she might be going into a place where she's getting the Camille treatment, where she's not really viable without specific artifacts. So in particular, her best artifact right now is Spectral Cutlass, which allows her to jump right into the corner and then kill your carry. So she's really good with that artifact right now and pretty playable without. I think it will be kind of hard to play her after the patch. Without having a Spectral Cutlass. Though they are compensation buffing AMP, so at 4 amp, she still does a lot more damage than she currently does. So we'll see how that pans out. Next is Shyvana. So Shyvana is getting a mana buff and an HP gain buff at 2 and 3 star. The 1 star was like okay, but it felt pretty bad investing a lot of resources into Shyvana, like putting items on her. Putting items on her and starring her up to 3 star didn't feel that impactful. So she's getting a mana buff so she can cast more, get more of that damage amp, and get more HP. And as well, her HP gain is being buffed as well. Next is TF. TF kind of filled the role as the premier reroll comp in this patch. He was very good. I think most pro players had him at like A tier, if not better. So he is getting a pretty sizable nerf down. He's being nerfed by about 7 to 10% at most star levels. It's like just under 10%. So your TF will be doing a noticeable amount less damage. One thing I'll say, just for context, is if a comp overall does about 5% less damage or gets like 3% more frontline, it usually goes up or down a tier. So if you lose 5% damage on the entire comp, you usually go from like S to A or A to B. Now, TF losing almost 10% of his damage, while he isn't all of the team's damage, Braum and Draven actually do a pretty sizable portion of damage on that team. He is still going to be a lot weaker. I would expect to see him like B tier at best after these changes. Skarner. Skarner is seeing a small mana buff, 70 mana instead of 80. And then he's also getting more damage that scales with his armor. So right now, his spell does more damage based on how much armor you have. So you're getting a larger portion of damage, about 10% more, based on how much armor you have. So you might see some scary looking Skarners, especially out of like Worth the Wait or something, where you can get him 3-starred really early. 3 cost. Only 1 3 cost here. Elise is getting a mana buff. Now, this mana buff is actually fairly significant. Getting your first cast after probably only 4 auto attacks instead of 5, because you have Dynamo giving you 1 auto attack a lot of the time, is pretty significant. Combined with the 4 Dynamo buffs, you might see at least 3-4 Dynamo being a real thing, especially if you have a lot of early copies of Elise. Elise is, I think, already valued as like a pretty strong early game unit, so she dominates most on stage 2 and stage 3 when Nitro is also particularly strong. And this hopefully can help her scale better into the late game, but I would be pretty scared of seeing an Elise with a blue buff on stage 2. 4 costs. All right. First up is Brand. Brand is losing 15 starting mana. So he basically casts 1 entire auto attack later. Now, this may not seem like a big change, but trust me, it's a pretty big change. If you have Shojin, like a lot of Brand's power comes from being able to kill the entire frontline in just about 2 casts. Getting those casts each 1 second later can make a pretty big difference in a fight. If you recall all the times where you barely won a fight with Brand because he got his cast off, those will no longer happen if you have a Shojin. Or sorry, those will no longer happen on the new patch. He will be behind what that used to be. The other change is a system change with Brand. So his ability now always arrives on his target after 0.75 seconds, and his mana lockout is now a fixed duration of 1.9 seconds. The way that they explain this change in the patch notes is that for units that are at 4 range, this is about the same as it was before, so like you'll not notice a huge difference in how fast he casts. But for far targets that are like past the front line and onto their back line, you should notice that he's able to start casting faster. This might make up for the mana change, because this is only one Shojin auto, right? So if you auto attack, if you get 1 or 2 more auto attacks because of this change, he's actually basically power neutral on the patch. We'll see how that works out. Small nerf to Nico, so Nico is getting nerfed to 90 mana instead of 85. You might lose 1 cast off of this. It's a pretty small change, but a small nerf nonetheless. Nico is not a particularly strong unit at the moment, but her traits are really good. Like, the unit's not so powerful, but the traits are really strong. Like, Strategist and Street Demon are both really good traits. So they're nerfing the power of Nico to hopefully drive down the power of the frontline of those comps just by a little bit. MF, seeing another 3 AD buff. MF's base AD was pretty low because her spell is really, really powerful. And buffing her up to 53 AD should help her hopefully be able to one-shot backline carries a lot more. Her most powerful use case is where she casts 1 time and just one-shots the backline. That's her most powerful use case, and getting 3 extra AD or 6% extra damage should hopefully help her be able to do that. There are a bunch of times where their backline has exactly like 100 HP left, and on the new patch, MF will be able to kill them. Vex gets a small nerf at 1 and 2 star. So she's basically being nerfed by 5% damage at 1 and 2 star. She was fairly strong on the new patch. She got a little bit weaker as people got better at playing some of the other comps. So I think she'll end up a tad weak on the new patch. Probably B tier as well, maybe high B tier. Yeah, Vex has some difficult matchups in on this current patch. Her matchup into particularly marksmen isn't amazing, and this makes it kind of harder. Combining that with the fact that marksmen are getting buffed and going to be more powerful and prevalent next patch, I would be surprised if Vex was still a very good comp given those sets of changes. Then on to Zeri. So Zeri's getting a buff from 0.75 to 0.8 base attack speed. Now, base attack speeds you always have to be careful about. I remember back in set 10 where they nerfed 4-cost Ari, the one that threw like the single target balls. She got nerfed from 0.8 to 0.75, and she went from S tier to like high B tier or like low A tier. So this buff this is especially prevalent on units that build Ginsu, because the faster you stack the first stack, the faster you proc the second stack, which means you're stacking up significantly faster than you were before. So I would expect to see Zeri be probably another premier comp alongside MF in the current 5 Exotech versions of the comp. That's what I would be expecting to see. We'll see how that pans out, but Zeri should be a lot stronger on the new patch. Right now, she's considered to be quite weak, and this should help her a lot. 5 costs. So the main change to 5 costs is that Renekton is getting an all-around buff. His first cast and second cast now come 10 mana and 20 mana faster. So his first cast comes after 70 mana instead of 80, and the second one comes after 210 instead of 230. That's significant because he needs the cast to be able to get his damage off the ground, and also to be able to get that HP. The most disastrous situations for Renekton is when he gets bursted down before his second cast, before he can gain the HP and really do anything with the buffs that he gives himself. He's a really cool unit and a really powerful unit when he's able to scale up, but he hasn't been able to scale up very consistently on the current patch. So this should help him scale up a lot. Small rebalancing to his spell. So his spell actually had cast damage on it, so like he would deal like a pretty big burst of damage when he casts. That's being rebalanced, so he loses AD scaling on it, which will generally make it weaker, but he's gaining AP scaling off of it. I think the only major the only major effect that this has is that he is going to be a lot strong. This part of the spell will do more damage with Titans, but I think overall this part is a small nerf to his kit. It's especially a big nerf to instances where you're eating a very high AD unit, like a Senna 3 or a Senna with items, or a Golem from Golemify. Those are the cases when he was particularly strong. and that's not nearly as strong with this interaction. But he is getting a bunch of other buffs too. He is gaining 100 HP on cast at 2-star, so he'll be 200 HP tankier on full cast. And his double strike and triple strike 80% is going up as well. So you'll notice that he does 180% of his AD per auto attack, and 300% after 2 casts. So this is a huge buff. This is a smallish buff. His damage basically goes up around 10% overall because of all of these changes. So if Renekton was close to viable before, he should be right on the mark with the other 5 costs now. It will make him really, really strong with Golemify. That was like the main case where you really were happy to play Renekton right now. But the adjustments that they have done here kind of balance for that fact, which we'll look at in a sec. The Renekton, right now he's not very strong. After these changes, I think he becomes a pretty reasonable unit. All right, Kobuko. Kobuko had some bugs with his 3-star where his shield, or not a bug, but basically his damage wouldn't apply properly, and the 3-star, his shield expired, so he would just kind of cast, not deal damage, lose his shield, and then die. So that wasn't great for him. So his 3-star shield no longer expires, and hopefully he can have those insta-win moments that all the other 5 costs basically have. Augment Silver. Adaptive Strikes, which is Jack's hero, is being buffed. The shield is being buffed from about 20% across the board. So his shield's going to be a fair bit larger, which allows him to be tankier and hopefully survive. And his base damage goes up by a pretty significant margin as well. I think it's about 10% as well. So this guy got pretty big buffs. I think he was like pretty hard to play, like C tier, maybe D tier before. This should make him at least good when you have high roll spots for him. If you have like 4, 5, 6 Jaxes early, or you can get him online really early, he should be a lot better now. Prep 1. Prep 1 is kind of weak. It's kind of hard to play Prep, especially when reroll isn't nearly as good. So they're buffing the HP from 20 up to 30, which should hopefully be a small bump to the Augment. Wolf Unchained, which is Silas' hero. The health gained is going up from 180, 210, 240 to 220, 250, 280. And the base damage is also going up. So he's getting a 20% buff to his survivability and a 10% buff to his damage. So another really big buff. Hopefully, I think the intention of these is that if you have a good spot and good items for these carries, they will actually be pretty good. Because right now, you hit them, you can win stage 3, you can win a little bit of stage 4, and then you kind of lose every round for the game unless you have some kind of alternative carry on your team as well. So these will hopefully make them better at being solo carries. And I would expect them to be a lot better on the new patch. Augments. So 10,000 IQ is being changed to give an Yuumi and an Echo. It always gave you 2 gold, even if you won or lost the bet, and that's being buffed up to 8 gold. And the reward is being upgraded from a random completed item to a completed item anvil. So you now get to pick the item instead of getting a random one. Also, the tooltip used to not be clear that the gold reward you would always get the gold reward. So now it just clarifies that it says that. I still think it's not very good because 2 item anvils really slow is not a super good augment. Because you will have to play through stage 4 with one of your gold augments only being 8 gold and a completed item anvil, which is fairly weak in terms of gold augments go. A lot of other gold augments, like replication or big grab bag, give you 3 items right away, which allows you to have an advantage, especially on stage 4. After stage 4, everyone kind of gets their items online, and the extra items become less and less useful. So I think 10,000 IQ, it's back kind of, but still not very good. Bronze for Life. The damage amp per trait is being buffed from 3 to 3.5. So last set we had a lot of different comps that could use Bronze for Life pretty well. But this set's trait web, it's a little bit harder to utilize them in a way that is strong, especially if Nitro isn't strong. Nitro is the core to a lot of the strong Bronze for Life boards, but Nitro isn't good either, so this would suck as well. It's being buffed from 3 to 3.5. So if you get 5 traits on your board, or 5 bronze traits, I should say, the augment is really reasonable. Like getting what? It's like It's like 17.5 damage amp. Is pretty good. And if you can get any more than that, that's just bonus value that you can get. So I would expect this to go from being not super great to being just okay. Caretaker's Favor. It now grants items retroactively if picked at higher levels than the level thresholds. So this particularly applied when you saw it on 2.5 or 2.6. When you were already level 5, you used to lose a component, and that's pretty bad design, right? So they just fixed that. And Caretaker's Chosen already worked this way. So yeah, don't worry about that. Climb the Ladder 2. This augment was fairly strong in vertical comps. It's being nerfed from 6 to 5 for all of the stats that it gives. It should be a little bit worse. It's probably not that strong anymore. It was decent before, but probably not that strong after this change. Cybernetic Implants 2 no longer appears on 2.1. Yeah, this augment was like really bad early game because you just don't have enough items to use it, and you would probably prefer to take Econ anyways a lot of the time in the early game. Or you want to take either Econ or items, and this doesn't do either. This amplifies off of you having items, so taking it on 2.1 was a very weak option. Flatline. Execute percent 12% to 10. This basically means your team does about 1% less damage, or like almost 2% less damage when you have this augment. So it's a small nerf when you do have this augment. This augment was really strong on the current patch. It helped marksmen a lot, and this also helped you snowball and get the attack speed stacks from the augment as well. So it's quite a bit weak. It's weaker now, and yeah, I think it was OP before. It should be hopefully less OP now. Golemify. HP percent 80%, down to 60% and 50%. This is a pretty meaningful change. This augment was really, really strong before still, and I think after it will still be pretty good. One thing to note is that a lot of the HP comes from the base HP. So like, if you ever taken Dumbify or Golemify with like almost 0 units on the board, you would still get a 3000 HP golem because that's the stage scaling, right? You get 1000 HP per stage. This should make the augment like hopefully less strong and hopefully less dominating on stage 3. Part of what makes this augment so good compared to Dumbify is that the golem has like 300 AD and would just straight up beat like 5 or 6 units on your board, and the rest of your team can hopefully win no matter what your team actually is, right? So this augment getting a fairly sizable nerf. Gold Augments Part 2. So new high score. New high score was pretty good early into the patch. Late into the patch, I think it wasn't super popular at high elo. And I think nerfing it more probably kills it pretty bad because this attack speed ended up being like around 10% attack speed. Losing 10% attack speed on your Vhagar is pretty bad. You're not really happy to get that. And also the rewards are extra reduced at each high score, so I assume you get a little bit less gold. So that combined with the fact that Vhagar wasn't even that good already, I would shy away from taking this augment most of the time if you're playing to win on the new patch. High Voltage. This augment was pretty good. The damage increase is nerfed from 25 to 15. I don't think that's a huge portion of the value, so this is like a fairly minor nerf. Should probably still be good, especially if you need the shred. No Scout, no Pivot. HP per turn goes up from 12 to 14. AP AD per turn goes up from 1.5 to 2. I think this augment was already okay on this patch, and is probably quite strong on the next patch. This amount of HP and this amount of AP AD is quite significant when you've been stacking it over the course of 2 stages, 3 stages. This augment is actually a really big win now augment. So this augment is really weak early into the game, but becomes super strong if you can like hit all your units, win stage 4, and then there'll just be a point where you have too many stats on your board for your opponents to overcome. So this augment, I think if you have like the right units and you have the right comp that doesn't require that, like has a bunch of low cost units that you don't have to like that makes it easy to play this comp without griefing your units pretty much, then it should be pretty good. Comps like Fiddlesticks and Mundo Zyra comps benefit the most from this change, I think. Pairs of 4s. So I put the question marks here not because this is like not because I think this change is like bad, but because to my current knowledge, it grants 1 4 cost on live on the current patch. So I don't know what it means when it says, this is what it says in the patch notes. It says 2 to 3. I don't know if it's going to give you 2. I don't know if it's going from 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. If it's 3, that's really strong. If it's 2, that's a little bit not quite as strong, but it's still a pretty significant change. The HP, you're getting nerfed 60 HP per each unit. So each unit, you lose 60 HP in the front line and usually 60 HP in the back line. It's a small nerf, but I think it's actually made up for by the extra gold that you get. So I think it should be stronger as a result after. Prep 2. Prep 2's HP per stack is going from 35 to 45. Just getting that small bump to prep. Both the preps weren't that good, so it's getting a little bit of help. Spirit Link base HP regen, getting another nerf. So it was nerfed last patch to not work on anything but champions, and this patch is getting nerfed back to 5%. If you've been playing since the last set, you know it was buffed from 5 to 6% late in the set, and it became pretty good from being not so good before. And now it's still, now it's probably still okay, but you're a little bit more reluctant to take it in spots where you have a lot more HP, because it does a lot less if you have like 100 HP now compared to if you had 10. Prismatic Augments. Blue Battery is getting its AP nerf from 15 to 5. This augment was pretty good with Yuumi and Vex in particular. So getting a small bump down for those comps. Bronze for Life 2, damage and per trait goes from 3.5 to 4. If there is a good board for this helps a lot, because if you can get like 8 or 9 traits on your board, you get a fair bit extra damage amp. Usually this damage amp number went pretty high. So if there is a good board for Bronze for Life 2, this is going to make it better for sure. Bulky Buddies 3, this augment was really good, just getting a nerf from 330 to 300. Implants 3 no longer appears on 2-1, same reason. Future Sight disabled. Yeah, this augment was pretty fun to play with, not really fun to play against. And there are some like weird dynamics with like stream sniping and like figuring out having to move every single turn, which makes your game really hard to play. And I'm kind of glad it's being removed. Gargantuan Resolve and the Plus version. Armor MR increased from 50% to 80%. Now, as far as I know, this augment and its power level is really closely tied to how good Rangar is. Rangar is the primary user of this, and Rangar is pretty unplayable right now because of how many other comps can test the same units. 7 Street Demon can test the Rangar and the Jinx, and 4 Marksman can test the Jinx, so it's just kind of impossible to play this comp. This helps a little bit, and if some meta things change, you might see Rangar be back with Gargantuan Resolve. Hard to Commit. Grants 3 gold on selection every stage. This is a pretty big change, or a pretty big buff. One of the big things with Prismatic Augments is that there will be a lot of really powerful people in your lobby that take really powerful Prismatic Econ Augments. Getting some extra gold to help you keep up probably helps a lot, and this is like, what, 12 gold over the game, probably? So it should help a lot with playing out your line and hitting the units that you need to. High-end shopping, gold granted 6 to 12. 6 extra gold probably helps. Usually you're rolling on 8 with this comp to hopefully hit legendary units, and the 6 extra gold just gives you a little bit more juice to be able to play the game. Shopping spree, gold granted down from 4 to 2. This gives you a lot of econ already, but nerfing the amount of extra starting gold gives you a bit less gold to buy the actual units with. So I think this change is pretty well warranted. It was very strong before. Wise spending. This augment is being gutted. So you get 3 XP per 2 rerolls instead of 2 XP per reroll. So every 2 rerolls, you're getting 3 XP instead of 4, which means you're losing a quarter of the augment. And the effect only counts for rerolls purchased with gold. So if you get any kind of particular synergy, like with what is it called? It's the reroll sub. It's a lot worse on that galaxy, and it's also just a lot worse overall. I think this augment won't be very good after the new patch unless you're playing a comp that is very, very, very synergistic with it, which I think is only really Golden Ox. Items. Bastion Emblem is being buffed from 10% to 20% in terms of how much your armor and MR converted into AP. Before, it was like a pretty weak item that you sometimes put on Mordekaiser in the Exotech comp to get 4 Bastion on your board. Now it should be like a better item. It's like it went from like a pretty bad item to a maybe like a little bit decent, like an okay item. Dynamo Emblem. This item was it was a pretty decent emblem in the Vex comp, but it wasn't a decent emblem to put on any of your carries. Usually you would put it on any other unit other than your carries. So now you get a little bit more damage amp per damage spent. I still don't think it's very strong, but it's a little bit better than it was before. Marksman emblem. I think this buff is good for every unit except Misfortune. Every unit other than Misfortune doesn't really make good use of this because either you're shredding one unit or just a few units with your auto attacks or your AD spells. But Misfortune basically can shred the entire board down 30 or 40 armor with one cast. And that's a really strong effect. So the fact that they're buffing this from 2 to 3 will make this much, much better on that unit. I would be very scared of Marksman Emblem Morgana after the patch. Slayer Emblem. Healing increase from 25% to 33%. Pretty small change. Yeah, pretty small change. I don't think this really makes the item a lot better. The item wasn't very good before, and I don't think it will be very good after this change either. Mana Zane. AS decreased from 15 to 10. AD decreased from 15 to 10. I think the AP is also decreased from 15 to 10. I just forgot to put it in here. So, and mana decreased from 15 to 5. This is a pretty big nerf. Right now, the item is like easily S tier. I would expect to see it at like low A tier after. It's especially a lot worse on high mana units like Brand because the attack speed and like the AP and it's more reliant on one-shot potential compared to repeated casts. So it should be a bit worse on Brand, combined with the mana nerf on Brand, and this Mana Zane Brand goes from being super broken to like probably reasonably balanced after this, which is good. Last but not least, bug fixes. Fix one of the stage 3 split or not split stuff. Big if true, stage 3 big carousel no longer has an extra unit with no item, which is kind of troll from before. But that's what transit is for. Anima Squad, final transit can no longer hit other boards. Good change. I think I've lost a fight because of this before. Spelling is hard. Tome Carousel banner announcement is now spelled correctly. Cool. Street Demon Empowered Hexes now show the correct stats during the planning phase. There was like some conspiracy that it was bugged and not working, but it's just because it didn't show the Sig Hex buffs until the start of the fight. So people thought it was bugged, but it wasn't bugged. Just the display was. Tagging Spree now correctly grants attack speed to non-street demons. Good change. It should work properly. 2-star 3-cost carousel now works. I did not know this was in the game. I didn't know this was supposed to be in the game. So yeah, there will sometimes be 2-star 3-cost carousels now. Woohoo. More like Misfortune, fix the bug where Misfortune's first wave could fire in an odd direction. Yep, this would sometimes make you solo lose the fight. So fixing this bug is pretty big and important. Fix the bug where 3-star Kobuko wasn't doing intended damage. Yeah, it just did not do proper damage and it would just lose. So this is a good change. I think there were a lot of people who hit Kobuko 3 and were very sad about it. Last but not least, Masterwork upgrade no longer duplicates an item when used on a unit during combat who stars up after combat. Yeah, this is a dupe bug. They fixed the dupe bug. Alright, cool. That brings us to the end of the patch rundown. So if you hopefully we'll see a good patch next patch. If you found this helpful, make sure to like and follow my channel. If you have any feedback for how I could do this better or worse, or like change the format or anything like that, please let me know if you have anything to say about that. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for checking my channel out. And yeah, have fun playing TFT.